I don't believe it. Surely it can't be true. A machine cannot have a brain better than mine.
Mate in 143 moves.
No, Pooh! You win again!
Bishop to knight 4.
Not all missions can be solved with chess, Deep Blue. Someday you'll understand.
Hey everyone, so this is game 1 out of 6 in the New York Man-Machine rematch between Garry Kasparov and Deep Blue in 1997. Kasparov began with knight f3, Deep Blue played d5 and g3 to fianchetto the bishop onto g2 and bishop g4 from Deep Blue. Here Kasparov played b3, going to fianchetto the other bishop on b2, and now knight d7 from Deep Blue. Kasparov played bishop b2, and here we should note that the plan is to maintain control over the e5 square. Black is trying to do the same, and if possible would like to play an early e5 to dominate the centre. However, this is not possible at the moment because we have two pieces covering the square, and Black doesn't want to swap off his good bishop for the knight as of yet. Deep Blue here played e6, and Kasparov played bishop to g2. Play continued knight f6, Kasparov castled, and now c6, supporting the d5 pawn and potentially threatening to play e5 at a later date now that the d5 pawn is supported. d3 here, Kasparov's plan is to play knight bd2 and possibly play a timely e4 to counteract in the centre. Bishop d6 was played, and now knight bd2. Deep Blue castled, and Kasparov attacked the bishop on g4 with the h-pawn, and the bishop is forced to move back to h5. Here Kasparov played a very interesting move, e3. Now, you'd think this was bad because the knight is now pinned by the bishop. An alternative was e4, but here Black may be able to play e5 and queen e1. Play could continue, and there's quite a lot of tension in the centre, but there's still a lot to fight for. However, with e3, Kasparov is just manoeuvring his pieces slowly on the first three ranks and doesn't want to open up anything as of yet against the computer. This was probably pre-planned and a way for Kasparov to counteract the computer's ability to analyse variations very fast, especially in open positions, which the human mind would not be as good at doing. So here, h6 was played, giving the bishop on h5 a recovery square and possibly giving the king room to breathe. If we play g4 here, bishop g6, knight h4, the bishop can now move to h7, But as white we could play f4, and play could continue bishop e7, and knight hf3 perhaps, queen b6 attacking e3, queen e2, bishop c5, and this is just the variation I looked up, and play could continue something like this, and there's still a lot to fight for, but white has good chances and has quite a lot of space with the pawns. However, after h6, Kasparov played queen e1, moving away from the pin, threatening to play knight to h2, and possibly plans with g4 and f4, and maybe even moving the knight to f1 and g3 or e3 at a later date. Queen a5 was played by deep blue, possibly preparing bishop to b4, where it would rake down against this d2 knight, and possibly play bishop c3, getting rid of the b2 bishop. And now here a3 was played by Kasparov. As we can see, I put a few lovely lines, but Kasparov's pieces are all on the first 3 ranks. He's just slowly manoeuvring, trying to get a better position, and all these pawns cover the 4th rank, so it's hard for black to get in at all. After a3, literally every single square on the 4th rank is covered by a piece and a pawn. Bishop c7 from deep blue, manoeuvring also. And now knight to h4, possibly threatening f4 and even g4 here. So if black plays a nothing move like a6, g4 can be played, bishop g6, and now takes, and black's pawn structure on the g file is compromised. They have double pawns. For this reason, deep blue played g5 here, attacking the knight, but this also opens up the bishop on b2, which has a bad consequence. Kasparov played knight back, and now e5 from black. So black is trying to take some space in the centre, and white's only option here is to play e4, otherwise e4 will be played by black. So Kasparov plays it. As you can see, both players are trying to fight for the centre. Rook fe8 from deep blue, reinforcing the e5 pawn. And now knight to h2 from Kasparov, with the simple plan of playing knight f1 and possibly g3 at a later date after g4 and manoeuvring the queen and the rook away to gain the space. Now queen b6 was actually played here by deep blue, and what this does is just eye up the bishop on b2, threatens to play a5 and pins the f pawn against the king, and queen c1 to reinforce the bishop on b2 and also prepare the movement of the f rook, so we can get on with the plan of moving the knight to f1. a5 from black, trying to gain some space, but with the pawn on a3 it doesn't really matter, because after they play a4, b4 will just be played, so I guess I wouldn't be too worried as white, and I don't think Kasparov was either. So he played rook e1, he reinforcing the e-pawn and getting on with his plan of knight f1. Bishop d6, deep blue sees the plan and tries to disrupt it. Once the rook has moved away from the f-file, the f2 pawn is now vulnerable, so bishop c5 here is threatening to eye up the f2 pawn, as you can see with the arrows. Kasparov played a good move, knight d f1. The plan is to play knight to e3 at a later date, possibly to cut and cover up this diagonal. Deep blue takes on e4. Another idea would be a4. I guess Kasparov would have played b4. Play could have continued takes, and now c5, but after c3, rook e c8, queen d2, takes, white actually has a much better position and will probably infiltrate the f5 square and d5 square with the knights. So for that reason they didn't play a4, deep blue took the pawn on e4 first, takes, and now bishop c5, just getting on with their idea. Quite simple really. And now Kasparov had a timely move, knight to e3. Deep blue continued rook a d8, getting his last piece into the game. Kasparov played knight h f1 here, getting on with the plan of g4 and knight g3. If we play g4 straight away, bishop g6 could attack this pawn, and now the knight isn't in time. There's no knight on f1 to play to g3 to protect it. If the knight was on f1 already, it would be quite simple, but here knight h f1 is just not in time. They have to give up the pawn. Play could continue knight c4, bishop takes f2 check. This is just one variation, it's a bit crazy. King h1, queen c5 because it's attacked, and now white gives up the rook. Rook takes, bishop takes, knight f6, bishop g2, and a4. Knight, the pawn on b3 can't take on a4 because the knight is susceptible to the queen being taking it. After knight ce3, bishop takes, knight takes, takes. After the smoke's cleared with all these recaptures and e4, the game is very much on, but I think black has the slight advantage. White's got two pieces for the rook, however black has 2 pawns extra, so it's anyone's game here. However, black does have a passed e-pawn, and the 2 rooks are in the centre, so it's very much in black's favour at the moment, and as white I personally would not like to play this position. So for this reason Kasparov didn't play g4. He played knight hf1, threatening g4, and for this reason Deep Blue now played g4 themselves. If they played a nothing move like king g7, g4, bishop g6, and now knight g3, as we discussed, the pawn is protected on e4, the 2 knights will jump into f5, the bishop on g6 is terrible, and white has a simple plan of maybe moving the bishop to f1 to c4 and continuing an attack. For this reason Deep Blue played g4, and now h takes, knight takes, and Kasparov played an interesting move, f3. It looks terrible, but it's actually pretty good. I mean, it pins the knight on e3, but it's also quite a strong structure. The e-pawn, the f-pawn and the g-pawn all cover the king quite nicely. And here Deep Blue takes, knight takes, and bishop e7 from Deep Blue, possibly trying to move the bishop to g5 where it's got a better diagonal to attack from. The queen on b6 is still there to pin the knight, so it makes a lot of sense. Kasparov here played king h1, sidestepping the pin. a4 is another move they could have played, but after bishop g5, queen d2, knight f6, and now the queen's attacked on d2. White can play queen f2, and I feel like white's position is quite stable here. Queen c5, bishop f1. This is just how play could continue. Bishop takes, rook d7. And here white has got the slight edge. The pawns are quite strong on the king's side. The bishop on h5 isn't doing that much, and white does have the 2 bishops. So a4 in this position was quite possible, but simple enough. Kasparov just played king h1 to sidestep everything. Bishop g5 now from Deep Blue, and rook e2. The idea of moving the queen to e1 possibly to protect the knight and get off this silly diagonal. a4 was played by Deep Blue, and now b4 from Kasparov. f5 was played by Deep Blue, and Kasparov took on f5. And now here e4 was played, and f4 was played by Kasparov, giving up the rook for the bishop, but gaining a good attack. So here bishop takes e2 was played by Deep Blue, and now black can't win an extra pawn. It could have potentially played bishop takes f4, but this actually is terrible. G takes f4, bishop takes e2, queen d2, and the bishop is attacked, and now queen c3 is threatened, which threatens g7 mate. So after bishop h5, queen c3, and say rook e7 to stop this, white can now play knight c4, attacking the queen. If the queen moves, we have queen h8 check, king f7, and now queen takes h6, and black is busted. After knight d6 check, the game is over, and also the bishop is attacked on h5. For this reason, Deep Blue took straight away on e2. Kasparov took on g5, and Deep Blue played knight to e5. Again, you're probably wondering, why doesn't Deep Blue take on g5? Well, knight d5 is a powerful move, attacking the queen, and also threatens queen takes g5. So if black takes this knight, queen takes g5, king f8, queen g7 is just mate. So here Deep Blue played knight e5, opening the rank up for the rook and placing an important piece in the centre, blocking the bishop on b2. Kasparov pushed the pawn, g6, and these pawns are absolute monsters now. two passed pawns right in front of the black king. Bishop f3 from Deep Blue, and a really good move actually. This is so subtle, but bishop c3 just stops the rook on d8 from ever entering white's position on d2. Queen b5, and now Kasparov wants to swap queens. Queen f1, takes, and now h5. And as I just showed you, the rook on d8 can't infiltrate white's position. The bishop is doing a really good job of covering d2 and d4. The knight on e3 covers d1, and the pawn on c3 covers the d3 square. Kasparov played king g1 here, getting off that bishop diagonal. King f8, and it's all about manoeuvring here. Bishop h3, and now b5, possibly preventing white from ever playing knight c4 if the knight on e5 moves. King f2, and now Deep Blue played king to g7. You might think this is a bad move because it puts itself on the diagonal of the bishop. However, I was looking at moves like, say, king g8. There's really good variation. If bishop g2 and say knight g4 check, takes, king e3, offering the bishop to Deep Blue, the bishop might take it. Rook f2, and this is just a killer. Threatening rook h2 and rook h8, mate. These two pawns on f5 and g6 are absolute monsters and worth more than a piece. Say bishop h3 here, and now just f6, and the game's over. The bishop on c3 is a killer, and these two pawns are just rolling up the board. But in the game, Deep Blue played king g7, stopping f6, but it also puts itself in the path of the bishop. Kasparov played g4, Deep Blue played king h6, if h4, g5, and now three pawns are just rolling up the board and unstoppable. So after king h6 from Deep Blue, rook g1 to support the pawn, and now there's a lot of exchanges. H takes, knight takes, check, takes, rook takes, and after rook d5, f6, the smoke is cleared and white is in a clearly won position. Here Deep Blue actually played rook d1, which is a question mark. It instantly loses to g7 from Kasparov, and here Deep Blue actually resigned because these pawns are absolutely unstoppable. Now rook d1 here was actually considered a bug, and rook g8 was a stronger move. However, it's still game over. Play could continue g7, rook f5 check, king e3, check on f3, king takes e4, rook takes c3, and f7. If rook c4 check, king can just move to e3, and black can't capture on g4 because f takes g8 will get a queen, and it should be an easy win for white. So in this case, rook takes g7, rook takes c4, the rook is forced to take on f7, rook takes c6 check, king g7, c4, takes, and this is a one-end game for white, and it's game over. So it would have lasted a lot longer for black, but white would have still won. This was the final position. Again, if a move like rook g8, f7 can just be played, and these two pawns are really, really strong. So that was game one. I hope you enjoyed it and learnt something from it. I'll be back soon with game two. Thanks very much for watching.